الاثنين في الغار الذي شهدت له آيات خير كتابي واليوم قد صدع الخبير.
بسم الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think there is no exaggeration in saying that the years, decades before Salahuddin were decades of turmoil, difficulty, instability in the Ummah. One thing that we forget is that there was a long sequence of events before the Crusades. You had, of course, the incursions of the Fatimid Shia all over the Muslim world. In 909, they capture Maghrib. 945, capture Baghdad. 969, capture Egypt. So imagine the most important parts of the Muslim world are under control of heretics, of other people. And it was so difficult that the Muslim Abbasid Khalif Al-Qadir was under house arrest and was subordinated to the Fatimid Shia. Until, of course, the time came in 1058 when a man called Tughril Beg, who was the first Seljuk Sultan, takes power from the Fatimids in Baghdad, defeats them. And from that point onwards, you had a rise of ascendancy of the Sunni world. The Khalif Al-Qadir was instrumental because he was writing these epistles promoting Sunni Islam, and that work, together with the work of a military campaign led by Tughril Beg, was so essential in therefore reviving the spirit of the Sunni world at that time. Now that's 10th century. Something else happened. So therefore you had stability after that, but something else happened in the year 1092, in a year called the year of the death of the Khalifs. So what's happening? Well, the Seljuk world, made up of sultans, here you had Nizam al-Mulk, who's been working as a wazir for 30 years under Malik Shah. Nizam al-Mulk dies 1092. In the same year, Malik Shah dies 1092. So the most important rulers in the Seljuk world, Nizam al-Mulk, Malik Shah, have both died the same year. In the same year, the Sunni Khalif dies. In the same year, the Fatimid Khalif dies. In the same year, his wazir, Badr al-Jamali, dies. So the 4 or 5 most important people politically in the Muslim world all die in the same 1 year or 2 years. That's 1092. 1095, you had the calling of the first crusade, but it's not the first time crusading is happening. In fact, you had Sicily, you had Spain, Al-Andalus. Pope Alexander III, Gregory VII, had called for what became known as crusading against Muslims in Al-Andalus in Islamic Spain. The Clara Volta Nensi, the very famous papal bull, calling for Christians to come together to fight the Muslims of Islamic Spain. So this was already there. The whole idea was already there. But 1095, a crusade launched against Muslims in Bayt al-Maqdis, in Al-Quds. Al-Quds in the Quran is given many different titles. It's Ardul Muqaddasa, it's the sacred land. Ardul Mubarakah, the blessed land. It's Ar-Rabwa. Some ulama, they say Rabwa in the Quran is about Al-Quds. In the Hadith, it's Ilya. It's known as many different, but it's always a sacred land. Al-Quds, Rabwa. Qariya in the Quran, some say it's referring to Al-Quds, Jerusalem. So this is the first time a military campaign was launched towards Jerusalem, Bayt al-Maqdis. And there were many reasons for that. One reason was, they say that the Eastern Orthodox Emperor, Alexius Comnenus, writes to the Pope of the Catholic Church, Roman Church, Urban II, asking for assistance because the Muslims are having victories, like Seljuk victories in the Battle of Manzikert, 1071, Alp al-Salam, and they were encroaching on the Eastern Empire. And therefore he asked for assistance against Muslims from the Catholic Pope. Number 2, you had, of course, this disbelief that the Fatimid Khalif in the year 1002 or 1, Al-Hakam ibn Allah had destroyed part of the most sacred precinct for Christians called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now that's not entirely true because there was a renovation program in the years after that. So although it's true that part of it had been destroyed, and the rumor would, the news would get to Christians in Europe from pilgrims traveling from Europe to Jerusalem, going back and telling their family and friends that this is what the Muslims have done. There was a renovation program of rebuilding the church, but that's not included in this. In any case, the Christians are of course angered by what's happening there. And out of these, the most important reason was a level of dehumanization against the Muslims of Bilad al-Sham, of Bayt al-Maqdis. And that they said the Muslims are animals, are evil, are savage, like here now for example, coming from the words of the occupied territories of Palestine, what they call Israel. That the people of Gaza are people like human animals, vermin, filth, undeserving. No one's innocent. No one's innocent. In those days, the same kind of propaganda against the Muslims. In the accounts of the surviving accounts of Ibn's letters, 4 accounts, but they're all written after the event. They're not very reliable. Of Robert the Monk, Gibe of Noyan, Fulcher of Chartres, all accounts, each one giving different spin on the whole thing. Some are eschatological. If you fight the Muslims, then Jesus will come back. Antichrist would come. And some are very much about the fact that these people in Bayt Maqdis are evil. They sacrifice their babies at the altars. They do evil stuff. And so therefore they should be fought, and Jerusalem should be in the hands of the Christians. In any case, they get to Jerusalem 1099 and they commit a massacre of the Muslims. Thousands and thousands of Muslims killed like in a few days' time. They kill them. They kill the women, they kill the babies. In the account of Albert of Aachen, he said that crusaders swung the babies and smashed their heads against the walls. And all the while they're saying, dus volt, God wills it, God wills it. That's the same words used in the Spanish Inquisition by people like the Grand Inquisitors, Dios la quiere, God wills it, meaning it has to happen, it has to happen. In any case, so Muslims lose Bayt al-Maqdis, Masjid al-Aqsa, for the first time in Islamic history. That's now out of Muslim hands. On top of that, the Crusaders build an empire. It's called Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. They supplant themselves. They capture all the coastal territories of Bilad al-Sham, all the main ones, and Jerusalem. So what's the response then? How do you respond to that? What's the Muslim response to this? Well, the first response comes, in fact, from the average people, the lay persons. Doesn't come politically, but from the average people, like the poets, like Al-Abi Waradi, like Ibn al-Khayyat, began to write verses like, وَكَيْفَ تَنَامُ الْعَيْنِ مِلْأَ بْجُفُونُهَا الْهَفَوَاتٍ أَيْقَظَتْ كُلَّ نَائِمٍ وَإِخْوَانِكُمْ بِالشَّامِ يُضْحِي مَقِيلُهُمْ ظُهُرُ الْمَذَاكِ وَبُطَنَ الشَّامِ. How can the eyes sleep at a time like this that would awaken any sleeper? When your brothers in Sham are sleeping in the bellies of vultures. You had poets. You also had scholars like As-Sulami, Ali ibn Tahir As-Sulami, wrote a book called Kitab al-Jihad 1105 in Damascus. And what is he saying? We've lost Al-Quds because of us, because of the fact that we're all divided as a people. Look at our state. Muslims lost Al-Andalus. Why? Because all these big empires that people speak of, states like Granada, or even before that, not Granada, but Cordoba, Seville, Toledo, Asija, all became autonomous entities called the Muluk al-Tawaif, party kingdoms. Each one was a provincial governor, became powerful, too powerful. The whole apparatus of state unity was compromised. That means that there was so much division. Christians of the north in Leon, Castile, Navarre, Aragon took advantage. And they defeated the Muslims based upon this division, divisiveness. As-Sulami is saying, it's not the first time it's happened in Sicily, happened in Spain, now it's happened in Jerusalem. And the sons of Malik Shah, Biarkaruk and Muhammad are fighting each other while Al-Quds is being besieged. He's saying it's you, your divisiveness, your division. You're all separated people. How can you have strength in this? As-Sulami therefore said that we have to solve that problem. Number two, he called on the Khalif for assistance. The Khalif, the Abbasid Khalif in Baghdad, provides support for the Muslims. And number three is saying that we have to all collectively go back to Allah. He's making all these statements in his text. Then you had military campaigns like Kilij Arsalan, defeats the People's Crusade of Peter the Hermit, Il-Ghazi, 1119, defeats Roger of Antioch in the battlefield of blood. Small good campaigns, victories for the Muslims, but it wasn't enough because more of these crusaders are coming as settlers in the land from Europe, and they're growing in their power. And Muslims are like weak in their state. And this remains like this, more or less in a summary, for many decades. Until the year 1144. 1144 was the turning point for the Muslims. Christians had 4 crusader states, Jerusalem and Antioch and Tripoli and Edessa, 4 states, big states. One of them was defeated in 1144, the state of Edessa, by a man called Imaduddin Zengi, the ruler of Mosul. And when that happened, it was a big moment, led to momentum in the Ummah, because they realized if we could take Edessa, that means we could take Jerusalem one day. That means if Edessa has been taken back for the Muslims, that means we have the potential to retake Jerusalem. And so all the poetry began to change. New poets like Ibn al-Qaysarani, Ibn Munir, and other poets, all kind of galvanizing around the scholars and the sultans and Salahuddin and people, not this before Salahuddin, that we have to therefore make the effort collectively to retake Jerusalem. But it was not Imaduddin Zengi that would kind of lay claim to this, because he would die, be killed. But it was his son, Nuruddin Zengi. Nuruddin Zengi was such a formidable character. He took power from his father, ruling Aleppo and Mosul, and he realized that there is such a task ahead of us. Responsibility. What does he say? He said that, well, number one, our state of Sham is divided because Aleppo and Damascus are just fighting each other. And we can't therefore hope to have strength against crusaders if we're in a state of disunity. So we have to therefore make sure that Sham is united, that Aleppo and Damascus are together as brothers, together. And he made that his life goal, to ensure that Aleppo and Damascus are united as one. Number two, he said that there is going to be a problem because the Fatimid also are controlling Egypt. The whole power base of Alexandria as a port, Damietta as a port, is not under Sunni hands but under the other hands. And they're allying with the Crusaders against the Muslims. So what do? He said that part of our strength has to be in defeating these internal enemies. And number three, there has to be a concerted effort towards recapturing Jerusalem. What does he do? Now it might shock you, but he builds madrasas. He builds madrasas all over the place. In Hama, in Homs, in Baalbek, in Damascus, all these internal states, he builds you madrasas. Why? Why is he building madrasas? Because he realized that in order for you to be capable of recapturing Al-Quds, there has to be a generational change of perspective. There has to be a vision. Now by this time, of course, the old people have died. There's a new generation of people who've never been to Al-Quds, never smelled the land of Al-Quds, never prayed Al-Aqsa. And he said therefore that we have to re-teach people the importance, the virtues of Bayt al-Maqdis. So he builds these madrasas, and then he institutes in these centers of learning a reteaching of the fada'il of Bayt al-Maqdis. New books are emerging of Al-Raba'i, Al-Wasiti, Al-Sama'ani, new texts. He instructs Ibn Asakir, the great muhaddith of the 12th century, to write a book called Tarikh Dimashq, History of Damascus, voluminous, like more than 30, 40 volumes long, so that people realize this is a land worth defending, fighting for, because it's important for us. He writes the text. Nuruddin Zengi was known as Dhul Jihadain min Aduwin wa Nafs. He was the one who holds two jihads in himself, one against his enemy, one against himself. There was a time, people knew about corrupt rulers, corrupt sultans, seeking power for themselves and grabbing land and this and that, and they knew this is corruption. But they saw Nuruddin, someone different kind of cloth he's made of. This is a man who would instruct his people to fight jihad and also to pray Qiyam al-Layl. That no one would enter his army unless he's praying Qiyam al-Layl. You can't be from his army unless you're praying Qiyam al-Layl. He would make sure that people are reciting Quran, memorizing Quran. He would make sure there is a spirit of religion behind everything that they're doing. A man one came and he said, Ya Nuruddin, we're struggling because we're paying high taxes. What about the taxes we have to pay? And the poet says to Nuruddin, Ya Nuruddin, ماذا تقول إذا وقفت بموقف فرد ذليل والحساب عسير وتعلقت فيما الخصوم وأنت في يوم الحساب مسلسل مجرور وأنت في ذكر القبور. How would you act, how would you be, Nuruddin, when you're in the depths of your grave and your army leaves you? When you're standing before Allah and you have a difficult accountability on that day. ماذا تقول, what would you say? And so moved was he that he reduced all of his taxes. Nuruddin Zengi was remarkable as a person, but two key events happened at this time. The first one, 1131. What happens? There's a man called Najmuddin Ayyub, the father of Salahuddin Al Ayyubi, the son of Shadi. Shadi comes from, so Divin is present day Armenia. It's like northeast of Turkey and north of Iran. And that's where Salahuddin, his family is from. Ajdana Khan, from tribe of Ruwaydiyah. And so Shadi, the father of Ayyub, comes into Iraq and becomes popular as Shehna, as a chief of the state police in Tikrit. His son Ayyub was now the guardian of the castle of Tikrit. So what happens is, remember Imaduddin Zengi, the one who took Edessa? He's making these raids into the Abbasid territory, Baghdad. And he makes these raids and he's defeated. Where does he end up? In Tikrit. Who's in Tikrit? Ayyub. So you might think Ayyub should kind of, capture him, imprison him. He doesn't do that. He gives him safety, keeps him in his home, castle for some days, and then sends him off back to Mosul, where he comes from. So why does he do that? We don't actually know why he does that. Maybe because a brotherly love or something keeps him there. That's 1131. Fast forward 1137 now. Now things switch. So Ayyub is now in trouble because him and his brother Shirku killed someone by mistake. For that reason, he's expelled from Tikrit. And who would give him support, lend him assistance? Imad al-Din Zengi. The same one he helped, 1131. Therefore he says, don't worry, come to me in Mosul. On the night they're leaving, Salahuddin Al Ayyubi is born. On the night they're leaving. They're therefore expelled from Tikrit and they end up in the hands of Imad al-Din Zengi in Mosul, Aleppo. Therefore, Salahuddin's earliest years are spent under the tutelage of not only Imad al-Din Zengi, but his son Nur al-Din Zengi. All those madrasas he's taking advantage of, scholars, that sense of religion in the streets he's taking advantage of, but also learning about military campaigns. Becomes very good at things like polo, playing polo, and archery. Becomes very strong and fit in these environments. Salahuddin as a young person. But like every young person, he has his own challenges. He realizes he has to, of course, to carry on in this task, he has to leave sin and leave this idleness because there was such a task ahead of us. Al-Quds is still in the hands of the Crusade. In fact, it's growing stronger. So Salahuddin Al Ayyubi, taking from the learning and wisdom and teaching of his mentor in this time, Nur al-Din Zengi, becomes popular. Why? Salahuddin Al Ayyubi, like I said, people had an impression of rulers before as being just, campaign driven, seeking family aggrandizement as political territory, meaning it was not substance behind it. There weren't that many. And he realized that what needs to happen is a complete change. And so people begin to believe in him because he drew people towards him in his character. He was described as not only a military expert. That wasn't, in fact, that was good, but not the main thing of him. He was someone who was known for his diplomatic skills, diplomacy. He could bring people from all parts of the world together for a single cause. That's the whole point. How do we unite the Muslim world around a single cause? Our holy site of Al-Quds, in this time Al-Aqsa, was in the Crusader hands. How do we unite the Muslim world around this? And so things begin to happen. He's growing up, Nur al-Din Zengi is going to use him. What does he do? He sends him to Egypt. Remember, Egypt was under the Fatimid control. He sends him there because there is a Fatimid wazir called Shawar. And he says, you know what, we're going to reinstate the man in power because it's better to have him than to have the Crusaders in power. Because they thought they could kind of control Shawar. This is called realpolitik. You're thinking about like what's better to do in a situation. In any case, he sends Shirku and Salahuddin, they go to Egypt. And in Egypt, they reinstate Shawar. That's 1163. What happens? 1168, that's 5 years later, Shawar makes an alliance with the king of Jerusalem, Amalric. Makes an alliance. That upsets the whole thing. So Nur al-Din thinking, I kind of put you back in power because I thought maybe it'd be good for us, but betrayal again. So therefore, he says we're going to go back to Egypt. So 1168, therefore, he takes Alexandria. Amalric and Shawar. Amalric, in fact, defeats Shawar. Look at that, internal betrayal. Takes Alexandria, takes Fustat, and then, takes territories from the Muslims. Salahuddin is young. He's only like 32 years old. He waits for them to leave back to Jerusalem. Then he invades into Egypt. And when he does, he takes power over Egypt. And when he does, he sets himself up in Egypt. 1171, the last Fatimid Khalif Al-Abd, he dies. And since that time, it's going to remain in Muslim control. So, off of the back of this betrayal, Salahuddin realizes there is a need for us to capitalize. He therefore has a program of builds the largest castle ever built in Cairo, called the castle of the largest madrasa, the big one, Madrasa al-Salahiyya. Madrasa al-Salahiyya in Cairo, in Egypt. He builds one called Madrasa Masjid al-Husayni to counter the veneration of the Shia. He builds Madrasa al-Fadiliyya in Egypt. All of these were centers not just of learning, but to emphasize upon the fact that you have to keep scholars close to you. So around Salahuddin, you had very important people, like Al-Isfahani, like Bahauddin al-Shaddad, like Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi, big names, scholars around him. Because you wanted to show that we're not fighting an empty war. We have a backing of scholars behind us. And so he builds these centers, more madrasas in Egypt, and takes power therefore in Egypt after the betrayal of Shawar allying with Amalric. And then he has a sequence of victories like 1170. 1170 in the port of Eilat defeats Crusaders. It was an important port because of the Hujjaj, of the pilgrims. That port was so crucial because it would allow for easy access to and fro for the Hujjaj, for the pilgrims traveling. 1170, 1171, the takeover of Egypt because the last Fatimid Khalif Al-Abd dies. 1172, he takes power in Barqa and Tripoli. 1173, next year, in rebels of Sudan, rebels who were allied with the Crusaders, he defeats them. 1174, victory in Yemen. 1182, then 83, big events. 82, you had like this, what's called, or 83, the Red Sea incursion. A man called Reynaud de Chatillon, who was a Crusader prince of Kerak. What does he do? He takes his army from Gulf of Aqaba, his port, his fleet of ships, and they travel in the Red Sea down towards Medina, Mecca, Medina. And so in the accounts it says that his aspiration was to go to Medina, to dig up the Prophet himself, all these horrendous things. Now Salahuddin is spending like 12 years, 1174, 1186, fighting where? In 4 main places. In Syria, Iraq, Palestine, Egypt. Fighting against who? Other Muslims. Other Muslims, and trying to convince them to be down with the cause, to allow this sense of unity for the Muslim Ummah. It's not easy. Not easy. In fact, fighting people who are so stuck, meaning they want to keep a hold of power. In this, they're going to be bought by the Crusaders, have to pay annual tributes. It's not easy. Resistance. In fact, it's harder fighting people like that. How do you convince people to let go of their domain, their power? They're so happy with their seat. They want to let go because they want to keep their territories. And so therefore he has to fight against them to ensure that everybody is down with a single vision of defeating Crusaders, the bigger enemy, and recapturing Al-Aqsa for the Muslims. And so that's 12 years, 1174, 1186, 82, 83, Red Sea. So a few things happen in Salahuddin's life. A few things happen. that make him realize that the focus can't just be on like places like Mosul. Mosul was one of the last places of unification. Mosul. He's trying so hard in Mosul because, a lot of, like, he's a Kurd, Salahuddin, not an Arab, but a Kurd. So he's trying his best with his kind of own people, North Iraq. But it's very difficult. Until two big things happen in his life. One, this event of Red Sea incursion, meaning that people are saying, what's happening here? They're going all the way down to Medina, Mecca, and you're still fighting people in Mosul. And this is happening in Medina. And number two, he has severe illnesses. He becomes weak. He has all these skin boils. And so that's a wake-up call for him, that life is not as long as we think it to be. You're ill. You're getting older. You're getting weaker. How much time do you have left in life? Therefore, why don't you do something with this time you have and recover Jerusalem for us? And therefore he shifts his attention towards ensuring the recapture of Bayt al-Maqdis. And so he sends Husam ad-Din al-Lu'lu, his naval expert, down across the Red Sea to defeat the armies of Renaud Chatillon, the Prince of Karak. 1183 happens. 1186 was the year where Mosul finally was united. So by this time, therefore, what's happened? By this time, you have all of Sham is united between Aleppo and Damascus. You have armies from the Hijaz, from Yemen, from Iraq, Palestine, Egypt, all prepared. A single effort. Salahuddin has the backing of the Abbasid Khalif. Therefore, it's really like he's in a very strong position. And what's happening is that people are attracted to him personally, as a personality, as a ruler. What kind of a person was he, Salahuddin? He's described as someone who was, Sari ad-Dama. In the Sunnah al-Hadith, he was someone who would cry often. Like he would cry often, one, because he would cry often when he would hear like bad news. People would see that and say, well, this is very strange, we've never seen this before. And number two, when he would hear hadith recited, cry often. He would encourage young kids, to learn the Kawthariya, the small surahs of the Quran like Al-Kawthar, and pay them a stipend, pay them a wage for learning Quran. He was someone who would eat little, wouldn't carry himself like he had, with any arrogance. He had 16 kids. He wouldn't exalt himself amongst people. Nobody is seeking exaltation. A humble person, simple clothing and simple food. Salahuddin didn't live in a real house. And they would say to him, like, why don't you have a proper house? And he would say, like, when a man is seeking martyrdom, what would he have of a house? What would he do with a house if he's seeking martyrdom all the time? Salahuddin Al Ayyubi rahimahullah, therefore, captivated not just his Muslims around him, but also the non-Muslims. Now they, of course, non-Muslims, the Crusaders had dealt with Muslim rulers, but when they saw him, they said this is a person who's so different to everybody else. Because he's a man like William of Tyre, the Christian chronicler said that he was a man who had three real virtues. He was a man who was valiant in war, like he fought bravely. He was a man who was wise in counsel, in advice, giving advice, taking advice. And he was a man who was generous beyond measure. Whatever he would have, he would just give, following the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Whatever he would have, he would just give. He wouldn't take for himself. He captured like major cities, like Cairo. the Fatimids hoarded so much wealth, he didn't take it, gave it to his army, gave it to poor people. Therefore, people saw in him, therefore, this person is not seeking, not seeking himself, but seeking the betterment of the world, seeking Allah's divine favor. And so, in the course of this, he's gaining so many followers from different lands. And he has people, different spots like Najmuddin Dildrim, like Qaymuz and Najmi, like different rulers, experts, station. And then comes a very formative years, 1186, 87. What's happened? Now, there was a truce between Salahuddin and the Crusaders, a truce, meaning no fighting for the moment. That same person, Prince of Karak, Renal Shatilon, he broke the truce. He attacked Hujjaj pilgrims, attacked the caravan, killed the people. That broke the truce. The Crusader of Tripoli, Raymond of Tripoli, is saying, let's renew the truce. Salahuddin says there's no need to renew it because the power is too strong on Salahuddin's part. So rather than renewing the truce, he takes his army to Tiberias. Tiberias now in what they call the West Bank. May Allah release and free and aid the Muslims of Palestine. Now in Tiberias is a water source. A water source. Salahuddin takes his 20,000 men from all over the world to Tiberias. And what does he do? He finds there's a castle. In the castle is a woman called Ashiva. Ashiva is the wife of a crusader called Raymond of Tripoli. And so what happens is that the head of the Knights Templars, these are like SAS of the military order, they said, you know what, we have to go to him now because he's going to harm Ashiva. So, guided right foot, the head of the military trumpets, Knights orders, and the troublemaker himself, the Chatillon, is convincing the king of Jerusalem, guided Yishion, that we're going to go to Tiberias and fight against Salahuddin. Others are saying, you know what, leave it, because they were themselves in the water source of Safuria. That's west of Tiberias. So in the Nakba 1948, it's not just that the Zionists killed everybody, they did, expelled them from the land. They also changed the names of places. Safaria now is called Zepori. Basma is called Biznek. So they therefore Hebraized the names to make it to appear as if no one lived here before. But so Safaria was there on the west side, water source. So what happened is that the king was convinced to go out and meet Salahuddin. Salahuddin stayed there in Tiberias, water source. Next morning they go out. They go out. They take their army, they leave the water source. Now it's going to be tough because they need water, horses need water, and on the way there, in the heat of the day, they're very sluggish and tired and thirsty. And Salahuddin is gaining access to all the water sources, and he stays in Tiberias. They meet in a place called Hittin, not far from Jerusalem. And Salahuddin lights these scrub fires. So the wind is eastwards, it is going in the direction of the Crusaders. Therefore it's so hot and all this smoke is coming from somewhere, and they're so stuck. And Salahuddin therefore in Hittin, the most formidable victory that he has in these days, Battle of Hittin, in the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is a month of victory. Badr, Hittin, Ain Jalut, Fath al-Makkah, Tabuk, all in Ramadan. So Hittin, therefore, in Ramadan, Crusaders are preparing themselves, but they can't do much. Nice Templars are there. They have a piece of what they call the true cross, what they believed was the real cross. Of course, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. It's untrue. But they're fighting with this true cross because they think we give victory for them. And so they're fighting with it. And Salahuddin's army captures true cross from them. And the morale therefore diminishes of course the Crusaders. Morale diminishes, and it was a complete victory for the Muslims. Isfahani said the number of dead was so many, you wouldn't believe anybody taken prisoner. And taken prisoner so many, you wouldn't believe anybody had died and been killed. So many had been killed of the Crusaders. Salahuddin's camp, an astounding victory. Everybody was captured. King of Jerusalem, Renaud Chatillon, Raymond of Tripoli, nice Templars, everybody was there. And a very famous scene you might have seen on movies, or clips. La ghaliba illallah. You know, La ghaliba illallah, whoever shouted that, La ghaliba illallah. If you go to Al-Andalus in Granada, La Hamra Palace, every single tile has that wording, La ghaliba illallah. Who's seen that? You must have seen it. La ghaliba illallah. Do you know, by the time they were in Granada, they'd lost everything. They lost Cordoba 1248, Seville 1248. They lost Toledo, the first capital, Seville, they lost everything. Now they're in the Alhambra Palace because all these people coming are refugees, immigrants. They have to leave their homelands in Seville and Cordoba because they've lost, have taken it, and they end up in Granada. Almost as a last battle cry, they're writing, La ghaliba illallah. No victory except Allah. The poet Arundi wrote a poem. In that time he said, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ إِذَا مَا تَمْ نُقْصَانٍ فَلَا تُهُرْ بِتُبْلِشِ إِنسان. Every like high point has its imperfection. Never be deluded by life of this world or human being. If you make your dunya your goal, you will lose the dunya and the akhirah. He said, أين الملوك أين الملوك ذو التجال من يمن وأين قارون أينما حزوا قارون. He says, أتى على الكل أمر لا مرد له حتى قضوا فكأن لكم ما كانوا. Where is Qarun today? Where's Ad and Thamud? Where's all the big emperors today? Upon all of them, he says, come something that they couldn't return from, meaning death, until they passed. And it's as if they went there in the first place. La ghaliba illallah was a reminder. We've lost everything, but we have Allah. What are they saying in Gaza now? In Gaza, you know, these young kids were standing on the rubble of what could probably was their home. And the man asked, interviewed, he said, aren't you scared? And he says, Nakhaf min Allah, we fear only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many stories, how many accounts of young people in the most difficult moments of human life exhibit the most outstanding and courageous sense of faith and iman. In Lewisham Masjid, the Imam said that 80% of all people who become Muslim, there in Lewisham, almost every day you have a shahada. It's because of Gaza, because of Palestine, because they're so moved by what's happening in Palestine that they can't understand in a nihilistic, atheistic world where nothing means anything. All you have is celebrity culture and these reality shows of TV, fake shows and all this stuff, and consumerism and all this rubbish where nothing means anything. And they're seeing people still saying, La ilaha illallah, still saying, Hasbi Allahu wa ni'mal wakeel, saying Allah, Allah, even though they lose everything. Now for a person non-Muslim, that's a big thing. What was happening here? And I'll tell you one thing. This is because of whoever shouted out, La ghalib Allah, this is a reminder. And the story of the boy and the king, Surah Al-Buruj, in fact, is what's happening there. The hadith is the longest hadith in all the hadith, as far as I know. This story, boy and the king. Maybe all of you know it, so I wouldn't say all of it. But at the end of it, when the boy says to the king, you know what, you want to kill me, then take an arrow and say, Bismillah Rabb hadal ghulam, in the name of Lord of this boy. Lord of this boy, in Allah's name. He takes his arrow, fires it, and the boy is shot and killed. What happens? The king said, you know, let's make a spectacle and see, let everybody watch this, like shock and awe in Iraq and Gaza. Let the world watch what's happening here. Same thing. Calls all the people, fires the arrow, boy dies. The king thought maybe that's the end of it, because he realized that the boy is going to die. Everyone believed. They said, Amanna bi Rabbi hadal ghulam. We believe in Lord of this boy. And one advisor comes and he says, Ara'ayta ma kunta tahdar. You see, what you were scared of in the first place, for wallahi qad nazala bik, has now come to you. Ara'ayta ma, you see what you were worried about first has now come to you. The mobilizing of the ummah, the growth of the ummah, people embracing Islam, the sense of even symbolic unity, powerful message for the world. In any case, in Salahuddin's time, Hittin is a victory. Now, of course, what's open up for them is Bayt al-Maqdis. The king is sent to exile in Nablus. They have no king. Look at this. Salahuddin is going back now with his army, and they're going towards recapturing Jerusalem, Bayt al-Maqdis. The same place taken by Crusaders in 1099, the bloodbath, the killing of women and children, bloodbath. One man who was in Hittin is called Balian of Ibelin, crusader, a knight. I mean, he wasn't a knight, but he's made a knight. He's on his way back to Jerusalem. Why? Because his wife's kids, Maria Komnina's, her kids are in Jerusalem. And his plan is to take them out of Jerusalem before Salahuddin gets there. He writes to Salahuddin on the way. And he says, look, you know, I got to ask you, let me go to Jerusalem at least and just take my kids out and my wife out from Jerusalem. Do you give permission? And Salahuddin says, I give permission for that. So he goes to Jerusalem, Balian, and realizes there's no king because he's captured in Battle of Hittin. And so the archbishop and the priests, they all make Balian the king, de facto king of Jerusalem. And they say, you be our king. Balian writes back to Salahuddin and says, you know what, Salahuddin, I made this promise with you, but now I have to break it because I'm being forced to become the king. So, but can I still take my wife and kids out? Not only does he allow that to happen, when they come out of Jerusalem, he gives them gifts and clothing and food and fruits for the journey back home. And such was his character. They couldn't realize. 1183, there was they besieged the castle of Karak. Look at this. Castle of Karak, 1183, the stepdaughter of the big shaitan, Reynald Chatillon, is getting married to Humphrey the Fourth, I think it was, in Karak. Salahuddin is taking his army and they're besieging Karak. They're besieging it until someone comes out and they're having a wedding on the same day. Same day they're having a wedding of Isabella the First, this guy's, the one he's married to, her daughter. Isabella the First. And so they come out and they say to Salahuddin, we're having a wedding today. And they give him some of the food of the wedding. Salahuddin therefore decides not to attack the side where the wedding is happening, but the other side of the fortress. Because he realized they're having a wedding. Let them have their wedding. This was the character of Salahuddin. It was very unique. No Muslim would see that. They would see that this is a person who, so some would say that maybe he was a Christian in disguise. They wouldn't believe that Islam was teaching him these kind of things. They wouldn't understand that. Once in Acre, there was a Christian woman in Acre. Someone, took the woman's baby and snatched it and then ran up with it to sell it on the black market. And so the woman is frantic and she's screaming and she's banging the floor, and she asked the Christians, what do I do? Can I go to Salahuddin? Because maybe he can do something. And then they gave her permission. Go to Salahuddin. Then she goes to him and says, Salahuddin, look, this is the situation. Someone's taken the baby. Out of his own pocket, takes his own money, his own dinars and dirham, and gives it to people to search for this baby before it's sold on the black market. In Ibn Shaddad's account it says, when the baby comes back, when they find the baby, and the woman is so happy, Christian woman, and she's banging the floor, she's thanking, God, whatever. Ibn Shaddad says he saw the woman and Salahuddin both crying. He says he saw Salahuddin and the one both weeping when he saw a level of mercy being shown by the woman to the child. He's made of a different substance, Salahuddin. This is how he captured people's motivation. People were gathering around him because he had qualities of character, of mercy, of compassion, of justice around him. In Egypt, look at Egypt. He allowed the Copts to live peacefully. The Jews, do you know, for example, look, 2 years ago, when they bombarded East Jerusalem, and they're still doing it today, and people heard of the word Sheikh Jarrah. Do you know Sheikh Jarrah is a person? He's buried in Sheikh Jarrah, named after him. His name was Husam ad-Din al-Jarrahi. He was a physician of Salahuddin. Physician. But his other physician was Maimonides, Musa bin Maimun, the Jewish rabbi. So that means you have a Jewish rabbi, you have Al-Jarrahi, both physicians, and he gives rise to the Copts in Egypt and the Jews. People can say Christians, Catholics have persecuted Jews for all the history. Pogroms after pogroms, Holocaust. But Muslims have never done that. Muslims act by their faith, by their deen, by justice, by Islam. We never made life hell for anybody. And so, Balian's wife comes out, and the kids, and they're furnished by all these clothing and fruits and everything else. But now Balian has to defend Jerusalem. So begins the siege, therefore. Of Jerusalem. What happens? Salahuddin takes his archers and they go to Tower of David and Gate of Jerusalem, Gate of Damascus, sorry. Gate of Damascus. And they're plummeting the walls, ramparts with all these arrows. But they're losing so many people. It's not working. 6 days, but it's not working. Until they decide to change their tactic and then move the army to Mount of Olives. When they do that, what happens is the Crusaders have no line of defense. They can't counterattack from that position, Mount of Olives. And so Salahuddin now is using Greek fire on siege towers, catapults, arrows, and there's a breach in the wall. When the breach happens, Balian comes out. He says that we're going to lose Jerusalem, we need to make terms. Salahuddin said, I'll take it without terms. He says, if you take it without terms, I'll burn everything. I'll burn Al-Aqsa, Dome of the Rock, all of this. By the way, the whole precinct is Al-Aqsa, including Dome of the Rock. Everything between the walls of Sulaiman Qanuni, all of that whole area, the compound is Al-Aqsa. Everything on it including Dome of the Rock, Masjid Qibli, Marwani, all of it is Al-Aqsa. He says, I'll burn everything. And 5,000 prisoners in Jerusalem, I'll kill all of them. Your prisoners. Salahuddin says, no. Release the prisoners. Don't burn it. And I'll let you leave in peace. Balin accepts. So Salahuddin, therefore, takes his army on the day of the same day as Isra Mi'raj. As the same day, the Prophet left from Mecca to Al-Aqsa. On that same day of Isra Mi'raj, the Prophet went to Jerusalem with his army. And what do? These Christians have to come out. He makes a pact with them. A ransom they have to pay. 10 dinars for men, 5 for women, and 2 for children. But all the women, noble women, elderly, he let them go for free. There were thousands who couldn't afford it, had no money. Let them go for free. His brother felt so sorry for these Christians leaving, let 1,000 go for free. On behalf of Balian, on behalf of the Patriarch Heraclius, 500, 700 for free. Another one, Fakhruddin, 1,000 for free. Meaning they left Jerusalem. With what? With a memory of how the Muslims treated them. With what courtesy, with mannerisms. He helped the elders on the horses. Salahuddin, he was concerned with public works. Even in Damascus, in the Umayyad mosque, he's fixing the waterworks. People are seeing this man what is he doing? Sultan. He's fixing the waterworks in the Umayyad mosque in Damascus. He's doing public works to help people. And so when they're leaving, these crusaders, they have to leave through Acre to get back home. And they're escorted out. He allows the wife of Guy de Lusignan, Sibylla, to go to Nablus to be with her husband. He lets noble women leave without payment. Why? Because the purpose was the re-sanctification of Bayt al-Maqdis. So he goes into Al-Quds. What does he do? He begins by sprinkling rose water everywhere. Rose water. New smell. Clean up the place. He takes off the crucifix, the cross from Dome of the Rock, takes it down. Takes off all of the plastering on the walls of Christian artifacts and symbolism. Removes it from the walls of Al-Aqsa, Dome of the Rock. And he brings in Qur'ans from Damascus. Into Damascus. He has a competition for who could be the first Khatib. And they choose Muhyiddin ibn Zaki. There's something I forgot to mention. Nuruddin Zangi did something formidable when he was alive. He built a minbar. Like a minbar. Not just any minbar. He built a minbar which was the biggest minbar. And he built a minbar out of no nuts and bolts, all interlocking parts. He builds a minbar and he says, we're going to keep this minbar in Aleppo. We capture Al-Quds, we bring it to Al-Quds. He died in 1174, 13 years before Al-Quds was captured. The minbar is still in Aleppo. Salahuddin says, we're going to bring the minbar from Aleppo. What you see in Al-Aqsa today is a replica. 1969, a man called Dennis Rohan was a Christian fanatic, burns the whole thing because he was waiting for Jesus to come. So he burns the mosque and burns the minbar. You'll find it in the Aqsa Museum today, the real minbar. Salahuddin therefore re-sanctifies by having Quran, by having the minbar, by having removing all the Christian imagery. And the Muslims come back into Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem. Salahuddin was a person known for many attributes. Not just the fact that he was valiant in war, and the future crusaders in Cresson and all different places. But because he realized there was a need, like Nuruddin realized, of unifying the Ummah, that our biggest weakness is ourselves, is our division. You realize that now Ramadan is coming, and you realize there is a need for us to fix two things. One between yourself and Allah, and number two between yourself and people. Therefore, if you find yourself, on speaking terms with your parents, your children, your siblings, make amends now. Because that division, in a small micro sense, in a macro sense, if everybody has that, that's division. So keep your families united, your societies, your masajid, the ummah, as much as you can, promote unity in the ummah. Because our weakness is our division. And so, another crusade happened, by the way, third crusade. The kings of France, of England, Germany all took part in that. But 1193 was Salahuddin's dying days. Age of 56, not very old. 56 years old. He marries Ismat ad-Din, Nuruddin's widow, by the way. That helped really foster the sense of unity between these two households of the Ayyubis and the Zengids. 1193, he's getting very sick and ill and confused somewhat, like very ill and sick, confused about stuff. And people notice a change in him, like he's not as he was before. Nuruddin, Salahuddin Al Ayyubi, he's gathered by people. Al-Qadi al-Fadil was his right-hand man. He would say that I've not attained what I've attained by victory, but by the pen of Qadi al-Fadil. Because he was like a polymath, a scholar, faqih, diplomat, poet, and he came running to his service. Ibn Shaddad was around him. Ibn al-Zaki, the first khatib, was reciting Quran, and all very important people were around him in Damascus, in Syria. And Salahuddin Al Ayyubi, one night on his bed, when the Imam is reciting, Wallahu alladhi la ilaha illahu, alimul ghaibi wa shahada. These were the last verses of the Quran, and the last words he gave was Sahih. He said it's true. And on that he breathed his last breath. They said that the level of mourning for Salahuddin was beyond anything they've ever witnessed in their life. Like for someone as charismatic, as disciplined, as prominent in leadership qualities as Salahuddin, he's now passed away. What does he leave with him? Like you would imagine other kings and emperors leave big estates behind them. What does he leave? He leaves 1 dinar. 1 dinar and 47 dirhams. Salahuddin leaves nothing. Ibn Shaddad, I think, says that لم يجد في خزينته ما يكفي لتكفينه, that there wasn't even in his treasury enough money to bury the man. Al-Qadi al-Fadil had to pay the money for his shroud. They didn't have enough money for the straw to line his grave with. He left with nothing. 1 dinar. His own shroud he couldn't afford. The cloth. Not for the straw for his grave could he afford. Because he just gave everything in the way of Allah. In charity. To help people in need. And people, they saw that quality in him. Before he dies, his son Az-Zahir was leaving. He comes back to Damascus and Salahuddin gives advice to him. He says to him, وَصِيكَ بِتَقْوَى اللَّهِ, I instruct you, be mindful of Allah. Be fearful of Allah. Know Allah. Because that is Ra's Kul Umur, that is the head of all affairs. He said, I have not attained what I've attained except by being good to people. Be good to people. He said, I warn you against bloodshed because blood doesn't sleep. Don't make a habit of killing for the sake of killing. No. Be disciplined. And don't grudge anyone. Begrudge. Because he said, death spares no one. It's a key advice and lesson for all of us. May Allah have mercy on Salahuddin Al Ayyubi. May Allah give aid and assist to the Muslims of Gaza, Palestine, all places. May we therefore, Allah, it's not, in human history when you have people who are so worthy of remembrance, that we remember their qualities and their attributes and their successes, it's a lesson for all of us. Because these are like humans, they're not prophets or companions, they were much less than that. But they rose to an occasion. And of course, in our time, we have similar situations concerning Al-Quds, the Muslim world. But I would end by saying this, my dear brothers. The Prophet says in the hadith, احرص على ما ينفعك واستعن بالله ولا تعجز. 3 things. Be determined to do what will benefit you. Not everybody is a Ghazi. Not everybody is a Khalij Arsalan. Not everybody is Sulami. Not everybody is Abu Wardi. But we do have skill. Everybody has a skill set. Some of you guys will become very prominent in different roles and positions. Some people are very good in poetry. Some people are very good in terms of training people. Strength. Some people are very good in terms of writing things. Scholars, imams, everybody played a role in that. I'll give you one example of that. As-Sulami wrote his book, 1105, Kitab al-Jihad. You know when he died? 1106. You know who attended his gatherings? Very small crowds. We know because we have the manuscripts. Very small, few kids here, few women there, that's it. As-Sulami, the great scholar, the Shafi'i Faqih of Damascus, calling the Ummah to unite, but the small audiences. Battle of Hittin, 1187, many decades have passed. They were deciding what book should we use to motivate the Muslims to partake in the jihad. They could have chosen any book, like good book, famous author. You know what they chose? As-Sulami's book, Kitab al-Jihad. So he died in 1106. The book became popular 1187. So never therefore underestimate or undermine your contribution. Everything has worth and significance. Whatever you do today can mean something, if not today, but tomorrow. If not tomorrow, the next day. But never give up trying. Everybody has therefore a skill set. And wasta'in billah. And the Prophet says that seek Allah's aid and assistance and place your trust in Him. Meaning always be connected to your Lord. Ask Allah's help and support in all things. And wala ta'jaz, don't give up. Don't feel as if you're too old or too weak. Don't give up. Everybody plays a role in terms of unification of the Ummah, helping the Ummah, assisting the Ummah. Be part of that process. That's something great in you. If Allah gives all of us tawfiq, may Allah give all of us tawfiq and assistance and help. May Allah bless all of you for your patience in staying here. May Allah make the words of goodness for all of us. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullah khairan.